Hello, today I'm excited to talk to you about a new IPO, C3.AI stock, or AI stock for short. That's how it's going to trade. AI, love the name. In one scenario, AI stock could be up over 300% over the next 5 years. They grew revenue over 70% in their fiscal 2020. This video goes over most of what you'd need to know in order to understand the investment setup. What do they do? What's their business model? What's the opportunity? What's the valuation? Go over all of that for you, my loyal YouTube subscribers. And there's a lot of exciting IPOs right now that I've actually already done videos on, whether or not it's Airbnb, DoorDash, Roblox. And so I wanted to, let's go through the major IPO pipeline. I wanted to look at C3.AI. But this video does go out to Varun, who is a Journey subscriber who asked me about it as I was starting to research it, so he read my mind. But this video actually goes not only out to Varun, but to all my Journey subscribers, and I'll get to that in just 1 second. But before digging in, a quick plug. You are watching Unrivaled Investing. This is a no-hype, mission-focused channel on finding you exceptional companies and unrivaled investments. So if you haven't watched before, I try to find you potential multi-baggers, the types of stocks that can go up hundreds or thousands of percent. So make sure you subscribe if you're already a subscriber. I appreciate that thumbs up. And if you want to follow my personal journey to try to find you potential multi-baggers, go to unrivaledinvesting.com. Click on Journey. Let's dig into C3.AI. Okay, so what is C3.AI? So they're aiming to become the leader in enterprise AI. And so you see this really cool, nifty iRobot type of thing, and you're like, oh my goodness, artificial general intelligence. This is like the superhumans when the AI has superhuman ability and just takes over the world. No, that's not what we're talking about. We are not talking about artificial general intelligence, where you have a super intelligent, effective computer deity. We are not there yet. May not happen in our lifetime. Maybe it does. What is AI at this point? And AI at this point is closer to like a Roomba. In the short to medium term, it's more like a Roomba that's good at cleaning a room. It versus a, artificial general intelligence where it can just be super smart, superhuman about anything. It's a Roomba where at times, sometimes the Roomba bounces into things, it chases the cat, gets a cat toy stuck in it, and you're like, oh my gosh, you stupid Roomba. But it can be very good at times for very specific things that maybe humans can do, or they don't want to do. So either things humans can't do or don't want to do. So what is AI now? The way to think about it is it's more like reinforcement learning. And what's that? So it's about training an algorithm on a broad set of data. Too much data for you or your team to want to, a team of people to parse through. So that's why I said you wouldn't want to do it. You want to spend a lifetime parsing through this data. You probably wouldn't be able to glean everything you needed from it. And it's just an incredible amount of data from a bunch of different data streams. And maybe by looking at all this data from several different sources, a machine algorithm can get positive reinforcement like, hey, this is the outcome we get in this scenario, and it can look at all the data that's going on when a positive scenario happens. And you can sort of create like a game-like structure where you get a point every time the machine detects something, and it will be able to see conclusions that you or a team of scientists or you or a team of engineers might not be able to see without it. It's becoming a critical tool. And an example that I like to point out to is DeepMind, which is actually working on artificial general intelligence, sort of longer term, but they've had several incredible milestones. Since then, I recommend watching the AlphaGo documentary on Netflix, which involves DeepMind and sort of completely disrupting the game of Go worldwide. But this algorithm that they created can play dozens of games at a superhuman level. And the example that that Demis Hassabis, the founder of DeepMind, likes to talk about is Breakout, where it's an old game from Atari, and using the same agent that could play dozens of different Atari games. It learned by playing Breakout. Now, Breakout's this game where you get this little bink, and it blinks against this, and you're trying to knock out all these guys without the ball, with this little dot going below, and then that's you lose. But if you if you're able to get all these without it losing, then boom, you get a high score. Ideally, you don't even have to tap it that so many times. So what did the DeepMind algorithm figure out? It figured out, hey, the best way to play this is if you break a hole through one side, and then it just works on the back side here, and it just works on the whole thing until it's pretty much done. And so that's an example of, if you're able to run something many, many times, you're going to start seeing conclusions that may not be obvious at first. Now, experienced players of Breakout would know that, but as you get to more and more complex games or more complex situations, AI will see things that even the best experts won't. So what's all this have to do with C3.AI? And their C3.AI, which aims to be the enterprise AI, they're working with some of the largest companies in the world to create AI tools, so artificial intelligence tools that are uniquely industry specific. So here's what Royal Dutch Shell has to say, where they're saying the C3.AI platform, which with its unique model-driven architecture, has been a real enabler. The technology allows us to integrate large volumes of data at scale in the cloud, and on top of that data, to integrate tens of thousands of machine learning models and train them in production. So there's a lot here which I'll sort of repeat and digest in the minutes ahead. But Royal Dutch Shell is one of the oldest and most storied oil companies in the world. They have over 345 billion in revenue, at least historically, and they adopted C3.AI solutions at one oil field, and is now, because of their success, C3.AI is now monitoring 2,500 pieces of equipment across their oil and gas portfolio, their platform. So what's the benefit to Royal Dutch Shell? Like, I still don't get it. Like, why would they use C3.AI's tools to help them? And the answer is C3.AI solution provides an early warning system to alert operators before a valve fails, helping to reduce unplanned maintenance costs, increasing production uptime, enhance safety, and extend asset lifetime. So here I show an unfortunate picture of a rig blowing up. Rigs cost tens of billions of dollars. Like you're talking about super expensive operations where when you have a rig explode, not only do you have the billion-dollar cost, but you're talking about multi-billion-dollar remediation in terms of environmental. So if you're able to have an AI that's able to say, hey, we're collecting all this data because this rig has so many different sensors, and it has, let's say, 100 or 1,000 different sensors on this rig, and it can tell, based on user history over the last few decades, when we start seeing these patterns, and maybe you're also importing weather data, maybe you're also importing what the sea levels are like at a certain time, or the winds are like, and you're incorporating all these different data sets. They're completely different types of data. It's being recorded differently. Maybe some is video, maybe some is historical databases, maybe some of it's in Excel files, and you're able to put all of that together, and they're able to reach a conclusion like, this is how we're going to prevent your rigs from getting shut down or worse. And I think the broader conclusion is that if AI is used in your industry, it is going to, in the years and decades ahead, become table stakes, meaning you need to use AI in order to operate, in order to compete effectively. That's what I mean by table stakes, just to be able to play the game, where you need to have it. So, for example, if AI tools like what C3.AI is helping, this Royal Dutch Shell with, it helps them yield more out of their oil and gas assets. All your competitors that are not using similar tools will be at a disadvantage. They will have a lower return on investment. They will have more rigs that blow up. This revolution in terms of AI having a superhuman, sort of very particular niche, superhuman, deliver insights for specific companies. This type of revolution, which is going to play out over the years and decades ahead, I think is on par to the revolution Bill Gates talked about in the 90s, where he was saying, look, you're going to see a PC on every desk. That's the same thing that's going to happen here. It's going to become table stakes for companies to operate. So, but it's not just helping, it's not just about helping to prevent, shutdowns, or worse, oil rigs from blowing up. You can see here that there's a wide range of potential just for a large oil company, where they're saying there's 3.8 billion euros in potential annual economic benefit from their artificial intelligence insights, these unique insights, such as, hey, we can help you with where you place your wells, or how do you get the most out of your wells so that way they're producing the right amount. You can see the euro figures that are tied to this, 378 million euros tied to better production, or assessing, like, hey, what should we be investing in terms of our assets? How do we make sure that there aren't outages in terms of reliability? What about refining capacity? How do you make sure there aren't outages with your refining capacity? How do you make sure you're getting the most out of your inputs for refining output? How do you make sure you get the best pricing, or looking at the input pricing? What sort of demand could you be forecasting, and what's that impact on pricing longer term, especially if you have a refining operation where it's about taking a raw input and, let's say, refining and producing something like gasoline, which is an output, or jet fuel. And it's not just about oil or the oil and gas industry. This is just one example where artificial intelligence can help step up the game for oil and gas companies. You can see it across several different industry verticals, from financial services, manufacturing, aerospace and defense, healthcare, telecom, utilities, where in financial services, based on lots of data, you can start saying, hey, we've seen the cases where there's money laundering, and now with this algorithm across all these data points, we're able to better assess when we think there's a money laundering scheme, or who are the best clients that we should be lending to based on all these types of data that go way beyond, let's say, looking at a credit score. Let's say you're able to import, your social, media profile, and that has an impact on your lending. That starts getting into a little bit of a Black Mirror-esque aspect, but the reality is we're going down that road, folks. The next is like customer churn. How comfortable, in terms of how likely is it that your banker's going to keep that relationship? Oh, these are the data points we see before a customer leaves us. Oh, we're able to target these customers before they leave. That will be churn is such an important thing that goes across all companies. Like, you want to make sure your customers, your employees aren't leaving. What are the data points you see before you see churn? They say customer relationship management, you see that in pretty much all their verticals, because they think, and Siebel, the founder of C3.AI, is looking to revolutionize, effectively customer relationship management in the years ahead. But you see that it impacts, manufacturing with how do they manage inventory, or how do you make sure you're producing the right amount? Can you produce more if you're managing your inventory better? With aerospace and defense, how do you make sure let's say the Air Force is ready, and how do we make sure you up your game so that you're ready, let's say, instead of in an hour, you can be ready in 15 minutes for an attack. With healthcare, let's make sure we're producing the right amount of goods that we need to have. Telecom, hey, you've had some network outages. How do we make sure that we can maintain the network without it going down? When can we predict when it will go down? Same thing with utilities, or predicting what your revenue looks like. So I get a high level sense of like what C3.AI is doing, like what they're looking to do, and how this is a huge impact on the companies that they're targeting. I mean, like, look, military readiness is critically important. Being able to produce more is critically important. Catching money laundering is critically important. Churning customers, critically important. So what exactly is C3.AI doing? Like, what's AI stock doing? Like, I get that this is what they're offering, like special insights that should save these companies hundreds of millions of dollars over time. But how are they doing? Like, what's going on? And this gets back to the example that I talked about with that oil rig, where you take in lots and lots of data. So data in, and you can get data from lots of different sources. You can get data that goes in traditional databases. You can go into non-relational databases. So it can be, a typical Excel file type database, or it can be something like a video file. Hey, what was the weather like that day when the rig exploded versus what did all these different valves show on the reading. And then how is all of this data? You got to take all these data sets that don't integrate together, and then you have to have some sort of connector that connects all this data so a machine learning algorithm can review all this data that you have. So take the data, integrate it, connect it, take a machine learning algorithm that says, hey, this is what happened. We want to make sure it doesn't happen. What are the data points we need to look for to catch it in the future? And then once you've sort of smartened up and trained the algorithm in order to have valuable insights, you need to present it to the end users so that way they can play around with it and you can see the different types of companies that are in this space. And then you need to make sure, hey, who are the people within the organization that can have access to this? What's the security behind all this data? So it's what C3.AI is doing, in short, is taking lots of disparate sources of data, connecting them together, going through them, taking machine learning, reinforcement learning algorithms to go through all of this big data and start parsing out like, hey, here are some potential conclusions that you might not have seen from looking at, let's say, dozens or thousands of different inputs that go into a model that you're looking at. And it might be money laundering. It might be customer churn. It can be one of these many different things that have thousands or dozens of inputs, making sure it connects together, putting an algorithm that looks at it, comes up with data points that you may not expect, and that results in valuable insights that you can visualize. That way management can see it and operate and execute better in the future. So here's an example just from 2020 where you have a Fortune 500 global healthcare company with $20 billion in annual revenue, ranks in the top 10 global healthcare technology providers, where they saw, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, they faced an unprecedented demand spike globally, requiring a fourfold increase in production for critical medical products and creating tight customer deadlines and significant stresses of factories and suppliers. Okay, so this is a big deal, and they're trying to figure out, like, how do we get the right products in the right quantities to the right locations on time? And the company needed an AI-enabled solution. So this is like bringing superhuman abilities to manage your inventory, manage your production, to deliver, in a time of extreme stress with a fourfold increase in demand. So here it is. They partnered with C3.AI, and in just 4 weeks, they rolled out a project to address all their bottlenecks, and the C3.AI powered solution aggregates and unifies 500 million rows of data. So this is what I meant. You're looking at lots and lots of data inputs from the company's source systems, a remarkable achievement due to the disparity of the data. The solution spans the company's global supply chain, including 3 factories and 6 distribution centers, providing up-to-date visibility of finished goods across its products. The outcome was enabling a 300% increase in unit production. And so this just blows me away. You have this major healthcare company, fourfold spike in demand. Within 4 weeks, they had a system that helped them increase production by 300%. They didn't know how to do it without this AI, and this was something that was critical in the middle of the COVID-19 panic. This is, in my mind, this is a successful story. I really, it's an inspiring story about the road that we as a society, as the human species, face in the years ahead. So what trends, is C3.AI sort of tapping into that's making all of this possible? Because there's actually several big underlying trends that they're tapping into. And so Thomas Siebel, who's the founder of C3.AI, he actually wrote a whole book about the trends that they're tapping into that will drive, what they're going to look like in the years, 5, 10, 20 years down the road. And the key themes that they're tapping into is, one, is the Internet of Things. So that means everything is going to be connected by sensors connected to the internet, constantly feeding data. And that's data you previously weren't recording, but that's because being able to install sensors on everything has become so much more affordable, and you can connect them to the internet that you're creating all this data. So now you have this thing called big data, where it's just immense amounts of data. In the example we were just talking about, 500 million rows that they're processing. And then you take this data and you load it to a key cloud partner like Amazon's, AWS or Microsoft's Azure or Google Cloud Partner, one of those top three cloud infrastructure partners. And that's the elastic cloud where you can tap into the cloud and quickly scale up all this data. It was way harder. It would have been impossible to get this scale previously. But now, because you can have an elastic cloud where you can sort of flex how much processing do I need? How much storage do I need? And you don't have to own the servers. You don't have to build out the servers. You're build based on what you use. It's so much faster and more secure and easier and more affordable for you to quickly scale up to address your big data needs because you, let's say, have sensors on everything. And now, because of all this, so you've got this data, you're able to store it, you're able to dramatically increase the amount of data that's sort of flowing through your company. You need to be able to analyze it for actionable insights. And the reality is, you can see all these verticals they're going to be attacking, like manufacturing, finance, defense, healthcare, utilities, energy companies, and you are talking about multi-hundred billion, if not trillion-dollar opportunity set. So when I think about C3.AI, I think, some companies you need a pencil to value it. Sometimes you need to look at it with like a crayon when you're valuing it. And this is the type of thing where you're tapping into such a huge market potential that this is easily 10x opportunity. And that's a key filter I look at for all investments of, does this have 10x potential? You're tapping into a multi-$100 billion opportunity. Yes. C3.AI or AI stock does have 10x potential. That's the way I see it. And so how are they going to execute on this opportunity? And they've done a really interesting approach where it's about finding lighthouse customers. So the way to think about it is working with the largest companies in each industry that they want to, in each vertical that they want to tackle, help solve their problems, build out industry specific verticals like finance was talking about money laundering, build out your library. So in this case, C3.AI's library of algorithm or models that they can then use for future use. Now, they're not going to be taking those models and using the data from one company and sharing it with the other. But once you've sort of fine-tuned this model, you can take it and you might be able to easily replicate it in other finance companies. So you can see how valuable this could be. It's like, oh yeah, this is the model that we trained. So this is how this model behaves. Let's take this other finance company, and it'll be so much faster because you've already done it once with one major lighthouse customer. Let's do it again, and boom, you're going to be able to very quickly identify the major pain points for them, get the solutions for them that you were able to do with that first customer. That first customer is going to take a lot of time, a lot of costs, but the second, third, fourth, it's going to be a lot easier, a lot faster, a lot more profitable. And not only that, but these major lighthouse customers, and this is an overview of their 15 largest customers that they work with, they start off with the initial contract, and in average it's been 13 million. But because of the success that AI has brought to tackling one bespoke project, like, hey, let's just make sure this oil well and is producing the right amount, they then get effectively triple in size the contract value. Because they're like, wow, this was so valuable, let's tack on other things. Oh, there's these other projects we think you could potentially tackle. Lots of data, let's do it. Maybe you can create an insight that we didn't know. What about their revenue profile? And you could see they've done 5x in 3 years, where they've gone from 33 million to 157 million in fiscal 2020. So then the question is, like, clearly you're growing quickly. 5x in 3 years is quite impressive. Are they unrivaled? That's a key filter I look at all companies. If you're rivaled, it's very hard to succeed over time. If you're unrivaled, it means no one's going to be taking your lunch. If anything, you're going to be tapping into a huge market, and you can just, if you're unrivaled, it gives you the right to win. That's the way to think about it. And so here it is. When they talk about competition, they say the competition is largely do it yourself. effectively custom developed company specific AI platforms and applications. They tend to be very costly, complex software engineering projects, often fail, and if at all successful, usually require many years to realize economic return. Most of our customers have tried and failed at one of these or more such bespoke development efforts, sometimes at great expense, before turning to C3.AI for their AI solution. So what they're saying is that most of the time they're not competing head to head with another company. Most of the time they're competing, effectively trying to convert the chief technology officer of these companies that are like, you know what, we're going to build it ourselves. And it costs a lot, it doesn't work. And then, I've heard Siebel joke, it's like, yeah, the next CTO, because the previous one got fired for not doing it right or coming way over budget, the next CTO is the one that hires them. Because it's like, oh yeah, this was a complete disaster. Why not give them a try? Especially when they can advertise these lighthouse or these major customers that are success stories in our industry. So then they go, we are unaware of any end-to-end AI development platforms that are directly competitive with the C3.AI suite. So that does get me excited. They then talk about two other potentially functionally equivalent GE Predix and IBM Watson, both multi-billion-dollar software engineering efforts backed by massive promotional campaigns. However, we no longer encounter them in competitive situations. So nothing here is making me think they're facing tough competition. If anything, it sounds like it's a wide open field and they are just ready to gobble it up. So this is getting exciting. They talk about how there are other players like Accenture and Lockheed Martin, but generally it's sort of like a piecemeal solution, and they're often costly, time-consuming, and not always fully successful because they don't really have the full sole focus on building sort of an AI suite of applications. Here it's more of a custom build for a specific customer. So this strikes me as super interesting in terms of the competitive dynamic. I would suspect they probably do compete with Palantir, another company that is pushing for artificial intelligence in the enterprise space, and Palantir is a big company growing at a good clip. So I would suspect over time you would see Palantir mentioned in their competitive space. But right now, for them to say, look, broadly, we're not seeing a competitor that has the full suite of solutions that we do, I find that to be really interesting. And then they talk about, hey, for the folks that have tried to build it themselves, in one example, they ultimately switched to us because it cost them millions of dollars and wasn't successful when they tried to build it themselves. And when they use our solutions, we are enabling the developers to build AI applications 26 times faster, so way faster than if you were to try to build it yourself, with up to 99% less code than other technologies if you're trying to piece this together by using conceptual models, including tens of thousands of C3.AI's pre-built models. This is where it gets so important that they have these major customers that they've won already, because it means they have a library of tens of thousands of models that they can lean on when looking at new customers. They can say, oh yeah, we've already dealt with this problem or a very similar problem with this customer. What's the model for that customer? Can we use it? Don't use the same data, use the same model that it trained for this customer. And so this becomes incredibly important because whoever has the models is going to win over time because they have the best data that they've trained those models on. And so they're going to have an incredible value proposition where it would be really hard for a new player to come in and compete when they're like, look, we've already worked with Royal Dutch Shell, one of the largest oil and gas companies. Like, if you need a solution, we're working with the biggest and the best. So do you think going with a no-name brand is going to help you? So I think this is really interesting, and their functionality is accelerating the ability to enhance applications with new features because they've done it. Like, hey, you're a company and you need to deal with this solution. This wasn't even something on your radar. Yeah, we've done it before. So how's the business model look? Over 80%, nearly 90% of their revenue is recurring in nature. It's really two parts. Part of it's a sale of a subscription for their enterprise or their commercial business. It's generally a 3-year subscription. For federal government, it's a 1-year subscription, effectively to their platform, the C3.AI suite. And then there's also a usage-based, effectively pass-through cost of like, hey, you're using, let's say, Google's cloud, and then we're going to have a premium on top of that. So usage-based runtime fee for production use of C3.AI Suite and C3.AI applications. And then on top of that, you do have the remaining piece, and this is what you typically see of professional services of like, hey, look, these projects, like the one example that we cited earlier, took 4 weeks to install. Those are people that are getting acquainted with your data, figuring out all these different data sources, putting them together in a model, saying, hey, let's get this application up and running for this customer. It takes time to get up to speed. Not every customer is going to be exactly the same. They're going to have different databases, different data sources, different data inputs. And so it's going to take time to sort of integrate that. So you will have one-time it's sort of professional service fee costs. It's generally super low margin. That's really, a fixed fee engagement for getting something set up under a set amount of time, and a duration of under 12 months. What are my thoughts on the valuation? So we've talked about their opportunity, we've talked about the business model, we talked about how it sort of seems like it has an unrivaled value proposition based on the fact that whoever has the most data, whoever has the most best models, will win over time. What are my thoughts on valuation? Clearly tapping into a huge market. So at this point, the time that I'm making this video, the stock is not publicly traded. It will be AI stock when it is publicly traded. So for it, the most recent articles I've seen suggest a $35 share price based on approximately 120 million shares outstanding. That implies about a $4.2 billion valuation. I try to use a fully diluted calculation when I'm looking at this. This includes options that may be around the around the $35 share price. And so, $4.2 billion for a company that did 157 million in revenue in fiscal 20. And then they haven't provided guidance, but I'm putting a range of, let's say, 10 to 30% growth for fiscal 21. And what type of margins are we looking at? At the end of the day, this company, it's a software company, high recurring revenue. Once you're hooked, you're going to be hooked. They have 75% gross margins now. I bet they could probably go higher in the future. But when you have a software company with 75% gross margins, you could see potentially, like 50% of that pass through straight to the bottom line over time. So it wouldn't surprise me if you see 35 to, let's say, 45% operating margins in the future. Slap on some sort of tax rate, let's say 25% tax rate, and you're seeing an earnings multiple of, let's say, 61 to 93 times, depending on what sort of growth rate you're assuming in fiscal 21. And at the end of the day, you're looking at a price to sales multiple of 20 times plus. So it is like, this is not in the cheap category of companies that we're looking at. What sort of growth rate do you assume in the years ahead? On the conservative side, I'm saying 20%. On the high side, I'm saying 45%. I haven't seen any guidance figures here, but this is just me sort of saying, look, you're tapping into a huge, enormous market. You're talking about a lot of potential competitive advantages. So it does make me excited. Here as a multiple of 2021 revenue, I'm saying the low side, it grows by 2.5 times 2021, whereas on the high side, it's 6 times 2021. So really incredible growth. What's the multiple? Well, the multiple, it all becomes sort of self-reinforcing. If you have the margins and the growth rates, it does impact what your valuation is. So if you have an incredible margin, incredible growth rate, you might have an incredible multiple, like 40 times 5 years out versus 20 times. So you could see in the upside scenario, if they're able to successfully tap into this huge market that they've laid out, like they've done in the last few years, where they've gone 5x in just the last few years. Here it is, I'm saying 6x over the next 5 years. They did 5x in 3 years. Then, you do have 300% upside potential that I'm penciling out in this upside scenario. That said, you also do have, nearly 50% downside. Could this stock go way higher or way lower than what I'm penciling? Of course, you do have animal spirits, but I like to be able to logically pencil out. I sleep better at night thinking, oh, okay, this is the logical framework that I'm using. What are the margin assumptions that I'm using? Should I tweak this a little bit? This is how I like to think about owning businesses in terms of, let's do a rough back of the envelope for how to think about the valuation. Overall, I like C3.AI. They're a company with a promising business model tapping into several revolutionary trends, completely disrupting, how traditional business is done in several key verticals like finance or oil and gas. They could potentially be a multi-billion-dollar revenue company in the future. Based on a back of the envelope valuation calculation, which I'm showing here, there definitely is that potential for them to be up over 300% in the next 5 years. That's based on a $35 share price, if they go public. So that's a potential scenario that I'm penciling out here. But to find out whether or not I'm buying, I think you know the answer, where you're going to need to go to unrivaledinvesting.com, click on Journey, and look, there's actually a lot more to the C3.AI story here, like that I just can't get into. This video is already going on like 30 minutes here, and like there's partnership strategy, concentration, founder history, or founder background, and I didn't do that here, but I'm going to do an exclusive video just for Journey subscribers that you're going to see in the comment section of this video. You can click on it if you want to see this exclusive video, and I'll also talk about whether or not I'm buying, if so, why, how much of my portfolio would I allocate to it. And that's broader commentary about like, what am I offering with unrivaledinvesting.com Journey? What am I offering with Unrivaled Investing Journey? And my value proposition to those that subscribe to Unrivaled Investing Journey is my goal is to try to find a potential multi-bagger each month. So, if you have a portfolio of cash each month, you could potentially allocate X percentage to a new potential multi-bagger. My goal is also to have an educational series that I'm rolling out each month, at least one new episode each month for an educational series. One of my most recent videos was the optimal betting sizes, how, the $1 billion secret to optimal betting sizes that I think most investment managers don't know about. And this educational series is to help you on your investment journey. The next aspect is exclusive content, like follow-up videos, like exclusive content here following up on C3.AI, which I will post below in the comments. And then next is a monthly update on my personal portfolio. What am I buying, what am I selling, what I'm holding. You can see my top positions. You can see all my positions, but I particularly go into my top positions and why I own them. And the reality is just finding one potential multi-bagger can change your life journey. So if you're interested in following my journey, where each month I'm trying to find potential multi-baggers, go to unrivaledinvesting.com, click on Journey, and if you see my portfolio, you've seen that I actually do, I think my batting average in terms of finding multi-baggers isn't so shabby. And so, but you can check that out yourself if you'd like. And so if you enjoyed this video learning about C3.AI, learning about the huge industry trends that they're tapping into, hit subscribe if you're already a subscriber. I appreciate that thumbs up, and thank you so much for watching.